Call this meeting to order. This is the May 24th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We'll get right down to business. Could I have a motion to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 10th and May 16th meetings?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So voted. Item 3 is announcements and reports. I have 2 announcements. The Opera and Small Business and Nonprofit Grant Program that we have in town is up and running, and businesses are eligible for up to $2,500 in grants, and we have awarded several. They included Thomas Auto Parts, Little Beginnings, I Craze Frozen Yogurt, Jump Nation, Shrewsbury Country Shop, and Tri-M Dental Equipment Repair. The application window is still open, and businesses are still eligible for up to $2,500. So we encourage you to visit the Planning and Economic Development page on the town website to fill out an application and get more information. Second announcement is the Memorial Day Parade is obviously on Memorial Day, Monday, May 30th. The parade forms at the Town Hall at 9 o'clock, kicks off at 9:30, proceeds up to the Town Center where we have a speaker, and this Memorial Day, it's Tracy Racine, who's a Gold Star mother. Her son was Army PFC Brian Moquin, who died in Operation Enduring Freedom. And after that speech and ceremony, the parade moves to the Mountain View Cemetery for the laying of the wreath. So hopefully it'll be good weather and people can come out. Any other announcements this evening? Okay. Mr. Mizikar, would you like to talk about the town hall operating schedule?
Sure. Just a general note before I do that. Good evening, board members. I just wanted to let the public, anyone that's watching, know that we are aware of and saddened by the horrific events that happened in Texas this afternoon. And we're preparing plans for increased police presence at all public schools for tomorrow and throughout the duration of the week, as long as it's necessary. So Dr. Sawyer will be providing additional communications potentially this evening. So I'll move into a couple additional items that are included on the agenda. After conversations with staff members and the board, this summer we're going to, for the first time, have town hall operating hours modified, really with 2 main reasons behind that. First and foremost, we are going to extend operating hours on Tuesday evenings. So the building, town hall, will actually be open from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. That very much is a pilot to determine if those additional hours are beneficial to the customers, and we'll be keeping data around that and see. And then mutually beneficial opportunity from the period of May 30th through September 2nd for town employees to depart at noon on Friday. So those additional hours on Tuesday will also be supplemented by employees only having a half-hour unpaid lunch break versus a full hour unpaid lunch break during their day. So all employees will continue to work a 37.5-hour schedule for the week, but again, it'll be modified for additional hours on Tuesday evening and then reduced hours. And we'll be providing additional information through all of our means of communication One additional note, in order to, again, see if we can provide additional customer service to the contractor community and any residents that would be interested, the building inspector's office is actually going to open at 7:30 a.m. On weekdays. So we're hoping that we have staff in the office many days at 7:30, and the phone starts ringing. So hopefully we can accommodate folks at that time. And that department will just kind of manage their schedules, and we'll keep track of that, and we'll report back to the board. So again, to recap, we have a modified schedule during the period of May 30th, 2022 through September 2nd, 2022. Town Hall will be open until 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and close at noon on Fridays. The building inspector's office will have hours from 7:30 a.m. each day. There will be slightly different hours for the Shrewsbury Public Schools Central Office while school's in session. So they will be open their traditional Monday through Friday to accommodate and make sure they have staffing during school hours. We'll clarify all this through a couple press releases, but we appreciate the opportunity to hopefully serve the residents better and give the employees a little summer extra break on Friday afternoon. So thanks for the opportunity to do that.
One question, if I may. Does this impact the library at all?
It does not. So the library's operating hours will remain the same.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So just a quick recap on town meeting. If I could, I just want to take the opportunity to thank the board for their support in developing the warrant and all your engagement on the things that we presented that ultimately made it, those that didn't, as we continue to work through your legislative agenda. Also wanted to thank staff for having us so prepared for that meeting. That's obviously several hours that is the result of several months of work. Town meeting members, I thought, were really prepared and had really great questions, and we really do appreciate those questions and the opportunity to engage with those members that way and look for more opportunities to do that in the future. I was really pleased with the results of the meeting. Ultimately, all of the articles that we set forth and put all that hard work into were passed. And I think they were passed, very clearly with a lot of support from the community. Now it's up to us to carry that through and provide those services and study those or develop those projects as we intend to do so. So I thought it was very successful. It's the end of a long town meeting and budgeting season, and we have already begun implementation measures. We hit the ground running yesterday morning, and we look forward to working our way through the budget process and those projects that were funded, from capital programs to other things, to like supporting the town center further. So
Just like that, I thought that's our third Saturday now. We seem to hit the flow. It seemed to flow a lot more smoothly than the last time. I think people were used to the bundling. Although there were a lot of new town meeting members, that seemed to go well. And it just seemed overall like people were prepared. I thought they were good questions. And I think most of the people like Saturday, although Mr. Cassavant and I were talking, and we think it might be a good idea at some point soon that maybe we poll the town meeting members and make sure that Saturday is the way to go, because there were a number who could not make it because of conflicts, and some, although most people seem like they want to do it, it'd be a good idea now that we have 3 under our belt to say, do you want to keep it this way? Personally, I think it's better 5 hours, whatever it was, and we're done. So, but I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I did think it went well. Any
I
other
would
thoughts?
agree with polling town meeting members to get their direct feedback. I think some of the information I have is anecdotal, but it's also a tough time of year, graduations and prom, there's just a lot going on. So I think it would be great to ask people what their preference is.
Yeah, talk with the town clerk, see if we can get something out.
Yeah, the feedback that I heard from a few town meeting members, a few had to leave early because they needed to either get to a family obligation, like, it's prom and graduation season, a lot of like ceremonies and big important things happening this time of year on Saturdays. But I know a few people that left because they had to eat something. And so I think that if it does remain on Saturdays, just sort of communicating the time commitment, especially to new town meeting members, so they come prepared. I think more experienced town meeting members know to pack a snack in your bag and bring a drink of water. But something like that may be worth communicating if we do keep it on Saturdays.
Great, thank you. And the other thing, I did get positive comments on the packages, the preparation, particularly the zoning, made it easier to understand, so kudos to everybody who put the work in that. So, okay, next, COVID update.
So the numbers from last week actually showed marginal improvement over the prior week. So for the week, we are down 23 week over week. So there was 163 total cases reported as of May 20th, bringing the total number of COVID cases since the start to 8,173. The prior week, again, was 186, so hopefully this trend continues and we are once again seeing declining cases. The Board of Health did vote on May 20th to put a mask advisory in place, so it still provides individual discretion, but given that we are a high-risk area in Worcester County, individuals should be aware that if they're in public situations or private situations where they cannot socially distance, that the Board of Health is issued a mask advisory for those situations. So they will review that as the numbers evolve. Hopefully it can go away quickly, and that trend played out in the first week, but we'll see what happens in the ensuing weeks. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, our next order of business is a meeting for a presentation from Polco, who did a national community survey as part of the Shrewsbury 2030 strategic planning process back in the late fall and early winter, right? The survey was conducted, and we now have the results, and we have, I think we have Joe Delalio with us, I think. Is he online? No, I don't see him.
There he is.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Can you see and hear me all right?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. I will go ahead and share my screen, which I'm sure is a very common phrase we've all come to know these past couple of years. All right, able to see the presentation all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, again, my name is Joe Delalio. Thank you for that introduction. I am a Senior Survey Associate here at Polco NRC, located in Madison, Wisconsin. But I always look forward to the opportunity to work with East Coast clients. I grew up in upstate New York myself, but grew up a Mets fan, so no conflict of interest with the Yankees. We can both root against them. And before I get into the nuts and bolts here, I also do want to give a shout out to Taylor Galusha, who was our point person for this iteration of the NCS, and she was fantastic throughout with getting us that information and helping us through that implementation process. A little bit about us, Polco NRC. NRC, or National Research Center, has been the premier provider for survey services for municipalities, across the U.S. for the last 25 years. We have longstanding partnerships with ICMA and NLC. Our founders actually did write the book on community engagement surveys, quite literally. In 2019, we merged with Polko, which is a civic online engagement platform. So in addition to our community surveys, we are also better able to provide a greater degree of resident engagement and outreach with our digital platform as well. And I want to emphasize that there are a variety of ways that the results can be used. Most commonly, our clients use the data to monitor trends in resident opinion over time, measure aspects of government performance, but also for community strategic planning, as well as the budgeting process. We also benchmark community ratings against other communities, so we can have a better understanding of where we are compared to other communities across the nation. And the National Community Survey, or the NCS that I will refer to it mostly through this presentation, it's our most popular community survey. It's a standardized 5-page comprehensive survey, and it covers what we refer to as the 10 facets of community livability. And these facets have been identified by survey researchers as the most vital to the quality of life for residents in the communities in which they live. And these facets also tend to work nicely into different departments. And so department heads can easily look through the report and access data which is most pertinent to them. So the overall flow and structure of the presentation and the report itself are centered around these 10 facets of livability. And I want to do an overview of the NCS for the town specifically. So this is the first time that Shrewsbury has administered the NCS. It was open for 7 weeks total from the end of January through mid-March. And we employed what we refer to as a hybrid mailing approach. And so what that means is that we had a representative sample of the town overall. The survey was sent to 2,700 households overall, and it was broken up into 2 separate groups. So we had a group A that received 3 points of contact, and then group B that had 2 points of contact. Group A, the only difference is that they received a physical iteration of the survey, where group B received a only notification or postcard, to respond online. Now, Group A did also have the ability to respond online, so anyone that was included in the probability-based sample had the opportunity to respond online. And we do that approach for a few reasons. One, it's more cost-effective to break the sample into 2 groups. It allows us to send it to a greater number of residents and get a better, more voices included into that, rather than sending a physical survey to all 2,700 households. It's also greener, allows us to use less paper that we send out. And tertiary reason is that it is also great for us to continue to evaluate our approach, and we can see how responses look in Group A versus Group B, and so we can make decisions on that in the future. Now, of the 2,700 households that received the survey, we had 614 total responses, and this was across over paper and online responses. And this equates to a 24% overall response rate, as well as a 4% margin of error at a 95% confidence interval. And the 95% confidence interval is the gold standard in survey research. Now, along with the probability-based sample, we did run a non-probability-based survey, which was open to all residents, and this received 487 responses. The bulk of the report, as well as the presentation I'll go over, will focus on the probability base. So that's where the data comes from. And both surveys after completion were statistically weighted to reflect Shrewsbury overall. So we used the 2019 ACS data. We'll upgrade to the 2020 census data, but we weight with those responses with census information. So we're making sure that we get a good depiction of the demographic groups in the town overall. And along with this, I briefly touched on, but one of the advantages that local governments have in participating in the NCS is the the opportunity to compare ratings given by your residents to those from communities across the nation. And it helps to contextualize the answers that we get. We have more than 500 communities in our comparison database, which comprises the opinions of over 50 million Americans. And I do want to point out, and something I'll touch on a little bit later on, is along with national benchmarks, the town did elect to run custom benchmarks. And so along with national comparisons, we did also compare Shrewsbury to like communities on the East Coast as selected by town staff. And along with the proud versus non-proud, we'll cover that in a little bit, but the bulk of the presentation will revolve around national benchmarks. Getting into an overview of survey results. We have 2 questions on the NCS that correlate directly to those 10 facets of livability, broadly, I will say as well. The first of which asks about the quality of these 10 facets. And we can see in the center we have the overall % positive data. And then to the right is where we have comparison to the national benchmark. And the second question we asked, it's the exact same question, but it is tailored more towards importance. And this helps us to build out this quality importance matrix. And for the most part, we do focus on that bottom right quadrant. It helps us to point and visualize any discrepancies or differences between quality and importance in a single facet, and can be helpful in influencing key findings and point to potential areas of focus for the community. Looking at those national benchmarks, of the 122 different items that were evaluated, 21 received responses that were more positive than other communities across the nation. 97 were similar, and 4 were less positive. And similarly, for the peer community, 4 received ratings more positive, 87 more similar, and 11 less positive. And before jumping into the survey highlights themselves, I definitely want to note here that this is what stood out to us as survey researchers, but there's a lot of data in the report, and there are much more highlights to be gleaned from that. So definitely want to keep that in mind as I go through these survey highlights. The first of which being that residents think Shrewsbury is a great place to live. And with that, about 9 in 10 residents gave excellent or good ratings to the town as a place to live, overall quality of life, overall image or reputation, as well as the town as a place to raise children. And a high proportion of residents, 8 in 10, also stated that they plan to remain in the town for the next 5 years. And something that I did want to point out here too is that undoubtedly something that adds to the quality of life in the town is how inclusive it is. It's something that was pointed out by residents, with about 8 in 10 giving positive ratings to valuing and respecting residents of diverse backgrounds. Very similar amount attracting folks from diverse backgrounds, and about 3/4 of residents giving positive ratings to taking care of vulnerable residents. And I do want to note that each of these 3 ratings was higher than the national comparison. Key finding number 2, safety ratings were exceptional and also contribute to the quality of life in Shrewsbury. And starting out here, about 95% of residents gave excellent or good ratings to the overall feeling of safety, which was higher than the benchmark. And then similar feeling with feelings of safety overall in the town. An overwhelming majority of residents reported to feeling safe in the neighborhood during the day, downtown commercial area during the day, from violent crime, fire, flood, natural disaster, and also from property crime. And this was followed up with not only feelings of safety, but high praise for the safety services overall in the town, many of which were ranked above the national benchmark as well. Almost virtually all residents had positive feelings toward fire services, emergency medical services. 9 and 10, also crime prevention. Slightly lower, but still very strong majority, fire prevention education, animal control, and emergency preparedness. And I want to point out as well that crime prevention, animal control, and emergency preparedness were all higher than the national benchmarks, while others were similar. Key finding number 3, mobility is a possible area of opportunity for the town. But I do want to start off with, there were a number of positive responses in this facet. About 80% gave positive ratings to snow removal, as well as ease of travel by car, street lighting, and about 3/4 the traffic enforcement and street cleaning. Snow removal was higher than the national benchmark, while the following 4 were similar. So none were lower than the benchmark here. Where this changed up a little bit was mostly with alternative forms of travel in the town. Overall transportation was also rated with around half of residents as positive, 43%. And then those other items, ease of travel by bicycle, ease of travel by public transportation, were around 3 and 10. Around half reported to have walked or biked instead of driving in the past 12 months. Slightly lower proportion carpool with other adults, and then about 1 in 10 reported to have used public transportation instead of driving. Something definitely to keep in mind, as we did as well, is the size of the community and the needs, but still something interesting that we wanted to share and point out with the community. Key finding number 4 is that community members prioritize utilities. And with this was pointed out before we mentioned the quality and importance metric. We noticed that the overall quality, while rated highly at 71%, was about 20 points lower than the overall quality of the utility infrastructure when asked about how essential or important it was for residents that they felt the community to focus on in the next 2 years. And so we wanted to focus on that, looking at that difference between the two. Being said, a number of the items in this facet were rated higher than the benchmark, and the overall, as I stated, was also rated highly at 71%. But even more so, around 9 and 10 had positive feelings toward power, electric, and/or gas utility. 8 and 10 also utility billing, garbage collection, and around 3/4 sewer services. Around 2/3 had positive feelings towards affordable and high-speed internet, and then the lowest in this facet at around 50% was drinking water. Power, utility, and internet were all rated higher than the national benchmark, and drinking water was the only item in this facet that was rated lower than the national benchmark. And then key finding number 5, residents praised the town government performance. Again, an overwhelming majority gave positive ratings to the overall customer service by town employees, which was higher than the national benchmark, as well as to public information services and treating residents with respect. And a slightly lower but positive proportion of residents also gave positive ratings to overall confidence in town government. That number, that 3/4 or 2/3, remained constant for much of the items in this facet, with a similar proportion giving ratings to treating all residents fairly, being honest, the value of services for taxes paid, being open and transparent, generally acting in the best interest of the community and informing residents about issues facing the community. Of these, treating all residents fairly was higher than the benchmark, while others were similar. And something that I do want to note as well, in the comparison between town government compared to the federal government, the overwhelming majority of residents rated, they weren't rated against each other, they were rated separately, but Shrewsbury town government had about 80% support from residents, whereas the federal government received about 50% support from residents. The exact number was around 49%. So much more confidence in local government compared to the federal government. And so this is, again, a brief overview of the conclusions that we came to, but I want to note as well that these key findings are what we found interesting, and that I'm sure as you go through the report, there will be much more information and other points that you'll find interesting as well. And as we go through, and we've had the opportunity to talk a little bit with the town already and identify some areas, but I do want to mention as well that as part of the services that the city has already paid for, you have ongoing access to the online Polko digital engagement platform. And this is a great opportunity for follow-up questions, polls, questions backed on the platform for any of these topics or individual questions that we would like to dig deeper into. And along with that, I do want to note that as of this afternoon, we have over close to 600 folks. I believe the exact number is 583 folks on the panel for the town already. And so these are folks that have signed up to receive notifications on any further engagement that the town posts on the platform. We send emails out every Thursday, and so anytime that the town posts a follow-up poll or question, these 583 folks would get a notification that there was another question ready for their opinion. And I know this is a lot of information, so I definitely do want to stop for questions here. And I think I will stop presenting for the moment, just so I can see any faces with questions that come up.
Okay, Joe, thank you. I'll open it up to the board in a second, but I just want to ask you two questions. Is a 24% response rate considered decent?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. Yes, and so I'd say for the most part, we see around a 15% response rate. It's definitely something over the years that we've seen fluctuation with, and so we're actually, the past 5 years or so, we've seen a slightly lower response rate, but that 15% is definitely where the average lies. For us as well, I do want to note, as survey researchers, we do look more towards overall responses in that margin of error. That's really the key point that we look to. And we had that 4% margin of error, which is definitely well within the range that we look for those statistically valid results.
Okay, can I, just one other question. That last part that you were talking about, you kind of lost me with the survey and giving, you have people locally that are getting fed information? I didn't get that last part that you did at all.
Oh, gotcha. No, and I would love to clarify that. So when folks respond to the survey online, they have the option, whether they were in the probability-based survey or the non-probability-based survey, they have the option to sign up for the Polko platform. And so the panel we refer to there are all folks that have answered that survey or any other of the content that the town has put out to residents. And so when we refer to that panel, it is residents within the town.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, anybody have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A question for you. So looking at the absolute scores, and some you look at and say, well, 63%, 64%, not great, but then you look at it, relative scores and we're high. What's the interplay when we're trying to decipher this? You could be at 80% in one category and improve significantly, and you could be 34% in another category, and the best you're going to get is 43% based on national data. What is the slicing? Like, how do you see other communities dig into the and work with the absolute and relative scores, because they both have value, but you're going to see that the best you may do in a category for whatever reason is 48%, and that's the best in the country. So what's the interplay you see in slicing up the information so we can figure out those additional questions that you're talking about to dig deeper in the survey? But there's also going to be a lot of relevant data out there that says that in these categories, just so you know, a 48's an A+. Like how do people dig into that so they can really focus on those categories where you can make the biggest gains in total, as opposed to trying to get 95 on something that just doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. And we definitely see differences in location or size of community, but we find that it's not necessarily these different variables that lead to a correlation in, we know that like utilities will always get X amount of score based off of this. We've seen very large communities that, let's say mobility, they do very well in, or a similar placed community would do poorly in. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that we would expect to see certain facets do poorly overall. I think there are some that are a little more controversial in just the overall nature, and it could be fluctuation. The way that our benchmarks work is that we look for a 20% difference between the national average to go either say it's above or below. And that's because we really do want to emphasize that if there is an item that's higher than the national benchmark, that we recognize that, and that's a great feat. And then it also can be more beneficial in looking at items that are a little bit lower. I think pulling out the data and doing that, if there is data in a specific facet where we see trends that all of them seem to be a similar theme, that can be a great indicator. I do also think looking at longitudinal data where possible can be helpful as well. If it's something that fluctuates year over year, that can point to maybe a small element that was going on in the community that has corrected itself, or a hot topic issue. It can also point to things that have changed gradually over time. And so getting back to the thick of the question, I think that it's looking for trends within those facets, using some of the knowledge about the community, the intimate knowledge that we have about the community that maybe somebody outside of the community might not be aware of. And so if there's, initiatives that the town has been working on with utilities, for example, we can look to that and see how responses correlate. And that can be a good indication for, one, public opinion as representative of how those initiatives have gone, but it could also be an indicator for just the public knowledge of certain indications. And so I know that's not a definitive answer, but I think it is looking at those individual facets, looking at trends, and then thinking about individual cases within the community that can point to reasons for or areas that we'd like to get more information on.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up. So speaking of trends, with communities, how often do you see they do polling like this? Is it once and part of a strategic planning process without us to help inform it? Do you see every X years, and what is X years with that? Because like you said, it could be knowledge of a subject. So you could get a skewed score because it just happens to be this is a topic on people's minds during that time, whether it's based on national or local information or news. To get, say, meaningful data over a period of time, and this is meaningful data, but so you sort of ease out that maybe blip because of an immediacy of a fact or the like. Do you see communities do this type of survey every few years, every 3, every 5? What do you see as the general rule?
No, that's a great question as well, and definitely want to emphasize as well that the way that we look at it, it is a survey of resident opinion, and so it could be some differentiation between that resident opinion compared to actual, but it's how the community overall views things. But that's a great question as well. And we've seen some differences across community. Definitely more folks are following up in between benchmarking surveys for individual areas to glean some more information. And I would say that it ranges from every 1 to 2 years to 3 to 5 years. I would say most popularly, every 1 to 2 years is when we see communities run the benchmarking surveys.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? No?
I'm going to ask a question that I think I know the answer to, but I think about people who are watching this at home. Could you explain how we make sure that people don't take the survey multiple times and skew the results that way?
Definitely, for sure. And so we do, first of all, include language on every item that we send out, asking residents to only take the survey once, and that they've taken the survey to any further mailings disregard and not take it a second time. We also do have ways on the back end for us to check and make sure that we're not having multiple responses from a specific, I believe it's ISP or IP, but from an internet address. And then from there, we can also look for duplicate responses within the data set.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I can make some concluding comments. So, I just want to thank Joe for his support throughout the process. We've been working with him since last fall, and then timed this very well with the strategic plan. So I just want to share with residents that the full set of data and information will be available on the Board of Selectmen strategic plan website by the middle of the day tomorrow. And we, welcome any questions. I'm really grateful that over 1,000 people have taken the time to provide feedback to us. A lot of it is really meaningful, and it's interesting how we can look at those parts. Joe, we haven't really talked about this, but water quality is something that we've really been focusing on as a community, and I at least feel that the residents' perception of water lags the reality, so that's probably an area that we'll want to dive in a little bit deeper on a follow-up survey. But those are kind of next steps for the board and for us to consider is, where do we try to get some more information with the resources that we've acquired in support of Polco. And then we, of course, are wrapping this into our strategic plan. It'll be a key point of information that the board has already used, we'll continue to use as we develop strategic outcomes for community feedback. So I just want to, again, thank Joe for the partnership, and look forward to sharing all this information with residents in the coming days.
I'd just like to add that I spent a lot of time going through the results, particularly in the benchmarking in what was the back of our book. But I found I didn't find a lot of surprises. I found some things interesting. I thought for the most part, particularly in areas that we might have scored lower, that the public was probably right on, especially in the mobility area. Public transit in our area is not that great, for one thing. Biking is relatively dangerous here on the roads. They're just not built for it. But I think some of it, when you see it coming out in a survey, it might reinforce in our minds that, hey, we need to pay a little bit more attention to this. So I think I thought overall it was helpful. There seemed to be throughout kind of a consistency to it. I know the mobility part was a little bit lower, but you didn't see big swings within a category, which I thought was interesting and a little bit informative, that when people looked at it, there had to be some consistency to their opinion. There's something there that made it a little bit more solid. If they were scattered all over the place, I would ask myself what was going on. So whether they were a little higher or a little bit lower, they just seemed to be consistent. So I think there was a lot of value in it, and I think as we dig into it and start to use that, try to integrate this into the strategic plan, I think it's going to be really helpful. And I thought the 24% was high for a survey like this. So I was glad that we were higher than the 15%. It shows that there's interest in the community, so I think that was good. So the community, I think overall, is pretty engaged, which I think is good, because I think it'll help us as we go through the process. So thank you for the work, and I'm sure that we'll be working more with them as this goes on. So thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Oh, thank you. I hope you don't have a long commute.
Not too bad. I still got some more time in the office, but I just want to thank you all. Thank you for the hard work on your end, and looking to continue the partnership.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You all set? Okay. Okay, well, the next order of business is to review and act on proposed revisions to the Board of Selectmen policy number 28, Board of Selectmen appointments to municipal boards, commissions, committees, and ad hoc committees. This is a follow-up to a discussion we had at least, well, maybe a couple months ago, about advertising on a regular basis for positions on the various boards and commissions as terms expired. And we have a draft, and I guess it's time for comments and opinions on what people think we should do with that. So does anybody have any opinions, comments, recommendations? Mr. Semi?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this draft. So, yeah, we did have a pretty robust conversation several meetings ago. There are two types of proposed changes in here. The first fits into form or formats for consistency to pull out municipal and put non-elected boards, or making language consistent throughout, and that's fine in this policy. The second part in the draft that we have here, and this was a discussion we had at the same time, was whether or not every time someone's term is about to expire that we post their position as a vacancy, and that's what's in front of us. After thinking this through and looking at other towns as well, my concern with posting a vacancy every time someone's term is up can have an undesirable effect twofold. One, that we'll go post a vacancy, you could have 3 people, they've done an excellent job, there's no reason to replace them, people apply for it, and then the incumbents get the job. And it can create a level of frustration, as well as for those who are already in that position doing well, and then have to go through the process again, understanding that many times it takes a while to get up to speed in these positions, and to have to get up to speed and then go through the whole process again may actually discourage people from wanting to continue. And we know through this role or other roles throughout the community that it takes a while to get up to speed. So my thought is that the language changes were fine for consistency purposes, but rather than have individuals every time their term expires go up again so they're effectively up again and it's a vacancy, that there's a part in the process, and it's very consistent with other similar policies in other towns, that in the case someone's on a board, committee, or commission, which is section 4 under the standing committees, whose term is expiring, a notice will be sent to that person asking them to respond to the board, indicating whether or not they are interested in being reappointed. That we add another section, new section 5, that gives them a couple weeks after notice to respond in the affirmative, or they can respond in the negative. And if they respond in the affirmative, that just means they're up for the next set of analysis, whether we decide to reappoint them or not. But if they are interested in proceeding, they've done a good job, we wouldn't repost that position like we do currently. If the individual does not respond within, say, maybe a couple weeks, that's what I'm throwing out there, but I'd be interested in Mr. Mizakar's thoughts. I think it's usually 6 or 8 weeks prior to expiration of the term. We reach out to everybody. We give them 2 weeks or 10 business days to respond to us. If they don't, then that will be a vacancy, and then they can reapply if they want it. So rather than put it all up, rely on why they were put on in the first place, look at their performance, and then just add that step, though. They have to affirmatively say they're interested. They have a couple weeks to do it, and then go through the process as it is now, rather than post it every time. I'm just concerned that it could have the opposite effect. I do get that we want individuals, would love more active participation, more individuals to become involved, and to make sure that that there is a process here that when you apply, we're going to look through it every application rigorously to take a look at that. But I think that the policy, to me, as written, is pretty good. It's consistent with what other communities have, but I would add that added step of just there's some affirmative in writing response saying, yes, I would like to be reappointed. If no response, or they respond in the negative, we'd post that position. But I like the policy as it is now. I think it's worked pretty well, and that's just my thought.
Okay. Taylor, I was looking at a different version at my house. I had it marked up. It's not a problem. This is the current policy, right, that I'm looking at? Okay, okay. I just want to make sure we're looking at the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I agree.
Leslie?
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a few comments that I agree with you. And just, I wanted to share my thinking a little bit around this, because I know that we are all invested in moving toward a more inclusive government. I think of these boards and committees similarly to the way we think of employees, and that when you bring someone on, there's a rigorous process that myself as a board member that I go through in reviewing these people who apply, their applications, their letters. I take the time to call everyone and speak with them to then make the appointments. And I know that other board members go through a similar process. Those people that are then appointed are brought on a board, and then there's an investment of time by those board members who are currently there, and whoever the staff member is that staffs the board, to bring those people up to speed and cultivate a working board that's effective in their role. So my concern with asking people, or posting a position and asking people to apply, is that it might set up the situation where we have someone or a number of people who we know are working well in the role, and that we're not going to be looking at someone who's newly applying, because we don't want to create instability on a board and make everyone have to start again from square one. So I don't want to set up this frustrating experience for residents who might be looking to participate in one of these boards and committees, to apply for something, go through that whole process, to then not be appointed. So I think we have to really be careful about that. And that's why I just don't think that we can just say, okay, we're going to post every single vacancy every single time. So I would agree with what you're saying, Mr. Samia, to put around that opportunity for current board and committee members to say whether or not they would like to continue to really identify whether or not we're going to have a vacancy, so that when we do go out and look for people and new people apply, they really do have a real opportunity to be considered for the position.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Flynn?
And I think what is included in here is that just because the incumbent wants to continue does not mean that the appointing authority is going to automatically reappoint. So I think that what we're identifying is we don't want to be disingenuous by posting an opportunity where there really isn't an opportunity. But I think that, we've heard from community members, we want to make sure that we are looking at where perhaps there should be new people involved and making space for others to get involved if they want to, without disrupting, some of the stability and continuity of the work that has to be done. And I think just being on the personnel board for, 8+ years, that stability was, critically important. So I think that, it is a balance, but I think we need to commit to make sure that we are also looking at opportunities for others to get involved while, accomplishing what we're outlining here.
So I'm not sure, I'm actually not sure I agree with that. I think that, there's a fine line between maintaining stability and continuity, and making room for new ideas, just a diversity of ideas and perspectives. There is real value in that stability and the continuity of people serving on boards, and we need to identify a way. If we're not sort of advertising positions, that kind of leaves room for things to become stagnant. And even if it's effective, it could still be stagnant. And so how do we make space for new perspectives, while, still maintaining, effective working relationships within these boards and committees? So.
May I comment?
Sure.
Point taken. I think what we're just saying is that we're not going to advertise every opportunity, but that's different from never or rarely making those opportunities available. So I think it's just setting that expectation that when we truly do advertise an opportunity, that it truly is an opportunity, and not doing it because a policy says that we will advertise every opportunity, but, we're leaning towards someone who has been doing it for 3 years and has done a good job, and that's not too long, hypothetically. So I think you raise a good point. I just think if we advertise every job or every opportunity, I don't think it's, I think we do more harm by giving the impression that we will, turn over those committees on a more frequent basis.
I mean, could we include language, that a position's up for reappointment and there is an incumbent, but it's just, it's almost like elections, right? It's like when you see an open seat somewhere in an election, you tend to have more people that enter the race, but when the incumbent is staying in, sometimes people are not going to go up against that. And so it would almost like kind of tie our hands, where unless we're officially not going to reappoint somebody, then we would almost never advertise a position. So it's, I don't know, like I just feel like it's like a rock and a hard place with, just because something's being advertised doesn't mean that the incumbent is definitely going to get it. We could end up with these really incredible, like we've talked before about, we have so many incredible residents in our community, and, this untapped experience and intellect in our community. And if we have, we really have wonderful people working, on different groups and boards here, but if we're not advertising positions as they come up for a new term, how can we make space for those people? It's really, it really just comes down to that, is like making space for new ideas and new perspectives, where, it's not necessarily about somebody's doing a bad job would be the only time that we'd be posting a position.
I understand the point. I think, I've seen on boards, I think there's been a good amount of turnover in a lot of the boards, so I think it is happening. It doesn't always happen. I'm concerned on the other side, to use your example, if someone's in 2 years or 4 years, and there's a learning curve on some of these positions, on this position is elected, but others that are appointed. And then you could inadvertently actually politicize something where it's, okay, someone's done a great job for 4 years, and then we're gonna repost that. And it could be, now you have people going for it, you have someone that's done a really good job, then why would you take that person off? I look at the balance, this is an investment in that person that's there. They're either doing a pretty good job or not. If they're not, we wouldn't reappoint them. If we reappoint them, if I'm on a board or committee and I'm doing a good job, I'd want ideally some certainty that I'm gonna have some time to do the job that I'm doing. To put it up every year, I do think destabilizes. I think that that's the balance here, that there are people that may not cut it. We wouldn't reappoint them. They're not automatically reappointed. I think it's an assessment of the job that they do. I think we are seeing over the last few years, a lot of the boards have turned over. That's definitely happened, and I think in some instances, it's the opposite, that they're starting to get that experience now that they lost all at once because all the people that were on it left at the same time. So looking at, there's one board in particular I'm thinking of, that they are growing together where you're creating that critical mass of knowledge that I think would be protected here, but would still have the balance, that someone has to still do a good job.
Yeah.
And we are seeing new ideas. We are seeing a lot of the boards change, even the elected boards are starting to change. That I think we are getting that. It's just the balance of, if you put everybody up all the time, you're gonna, I think you run the risk of the folks that are doing it and trying to get up to speed may not come and do it again, and the people then applying for it may not get appointed because the people who were put up are doing a good job, and you could have frustration on both ends. So it's a good thought, and I understand it. I do think we're starting to see a lot of changes, and sometimes change all at once, which has been a challenge too.
Yeah, that absolutely makes, there is a lot of, that does make a lot of sense. I wonder if there's some way that we could kind of strike a balance, like find something in between where maybe it's after a certain number of terms, then a position can go out to, a position would be advertised. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be reappointed to it. And if it is a policy within our community, then, I would think that the people on those boards would understand that, this isn't being advertised because I'm not doing a good job or they don't want to reappoint me, but it's being advertised because that's the policy. And to put, almost sort of have like those term limits, and it's after a certain number of terms, after a certain number of appointments, then it goes back out to advertising, with the possibility of them being reappointed to it. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Well, obviously, I don't believe in term limits, but when I brought this up, it was partly because it had been an informal policy, and for some reason we stopped doing it. The other reason was because I thought, I do think I saw that some of the, some people, when we ask them, which we usually do, the office will send out a letter and say, your term is going to be coming to an end. Are you interested in being reappointed? And basically, please send us a letter or an email saying yes. And it seems like there was getting to be some complacency there, that we didn't even get an answer, or we had to chase. And I don't think that we should have to chase somebody to get their acknowledgement that they do it, they don't want to do it. And so that's part of it. I think that the draft, the way it was written after I looked at it again, was probably a little harsh. I think that I do think that what's been said this evening and what Mr. Samia has suggested is probably a good compromise. I'm not necessarily personally interested in creating turnover on the board just to create turnover on the boards. I think we saw one important board that had term limits that created issues for several years because we went through a cycle of not a lot of experience and longevity on it. So I think and I understand what you're saying, that if you never do it, then people get the impression that what's the point in applying? But I think what's being suggested might be a way. So maybe we could ask Mr. Samia to commit that to writing and bring it back to the next meeting and see if we all agree and try it. I mean, nothing's forever. We can change it if we find it's not correct. If it's not the right way to go. Yes.
So this policy is related specifically to Board of Selectmen appointments. So there's a reference in here that the board encourages other appointing authorities like the town manager, like the town moderator, et cetera, to sort of follow the same. But I think what we should do is put in a process where we're evaluating these, in advance. And I think the town manager had made reference, I think in a conversation I had with you recently, Mr. Mizikar, that you are going to track on a quarterly basis, sort of what positions are up for reappointment, and we can review them. And I think we have a conversation about, okay, is this a place where we really should be looking at alternatives or encouraging others to consider versus, this is a fairly young or a very cohesive team. I think we should, practice it in the way that you're describing, but not have a policy that leaves it open to obligate us to post it for every reappointment. Is that a fair compromise?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just, it's a difficult balance, finding a way to leave the door open for new people who are interested and want to get involved, and to retain people that are effective and doing a good job. How do we balance those two things? And sometimes, we could find ourselves in a, where somebody is going to be reappointed, but we have a great applicant that maybe we could encourage to look into some other role within the community, and not, not sort of like lose that interest or that opportunity.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, that does happen. So when we post a vacancy and we get more than we need as far as applicants, we do ask the manager's office staff to keep a file. And I know personally, I try to go back and think through some of the people who maybe didn't get appointed, what other roles they might be well suited for, because you're absolutely right. You don't want to lose that talent. I think it's also really worth mentioning that for certain positions, we're hard pressed sometimes to get applicants too. And sometimes when you have people that are willing to be in those seats, the only reason that they're applying is because it isn't an elected position, and they're not looking to go through that type of competitive process in order to serve the community in some way. So again, I think it does need to be a balance whereby we are encouraging and looking for ways to bring new people in. Mr. Mizikar, when we sometimes get, don't we already sometimes get from staff what's coming up for, and then we're able to respond to that if we want to see something posted?
Right, so that's the quarterly reference. So throughout the course of the year, there's some key dates, normally once a season, January 1st, March 1st, that time frame, July 1st, and then in the fall, that the cycles present themselves, and we try to be, 90 days in advance of that, of identifying which seats are about to open up, and asking the board first for feedback on the approach, and then soliciting input from the incumbent in the position, whether they're still interested. But so if we're going to look at some time frame in advance of that, and to give the board sufficient time to do the due diligence that you previously referenced, I would suggest, probably at minimum 6 weeks, that we make that determination whether we're, we know what the incumbent wants to do, whether they want reappointed or whether we're advertising or both.
Okay. Seems like we have general consensus.
Yeah, I'll come back with some language. I know where.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, hopefully we can do that next meeting.
Sure.
Okay, the next order of business is to review and act on the adoption of Board of Selectmen Policy 31, which would be a policy allowing for public comment at the Board of Selectmen's meetings. So this has come up from time to time over the years. Obviously, up to this point, the board hasn't done it. There's been some interest in it. So why don't we have some discussion on it? We have a draft that was a starting point for discussion. Anybody have any comments, thoughts on this? Somebody must have it, because somebody brought it forward.
I have lots of thoughts. I'm assuming I'm the somebody you're referring to.
Well,
I want to start by just thanking Taylor for pulling together so many examples of what other communities are doing and giving us a starting point. I sent you an email and I was like, so how can I help you? And you're like, well, I already wrote it. And I was like, okay, great. Well done. But it's great because we need something on paper that we can react to so that we know whether or not we're heading in the right direction. And so a couple of thoughts that I had around it is, number one, I think it needs to be shorter. I don't want it to be cumbersome for the public to make sure that they're in line with the policy before they sign up to speak and address the board. Also looking to create language that is more welcoming. And then just looking through it, the one thing that struck me was whether or not we want comments to address something that's on an agenda. And from where I'm looking at it, I think that that sort of defeats the purpose of public comment. And I think that it should be basically open to anything that's under the board's purview. I wouldn't want someone to come in here and talk to us about something that is specifically related to school department type thing. That's obviously not something under our purview, but if it's under our purview, whether or not it's on the agenda, I think is appropriate for public comment. And so, I did take for my own sanity, like my own way of thinking through, like I started completely again, look through everything that Taylor had put in our drive for policies and sort of wrote it out again based on what the starting point was to try to get it down to a page, which I think it can be. It's just a matter of deciding what parameters are really necessary for this first attempt. And the one thing that I'm really committed to is the review at 6 months. I think that's very important to make sure that we try it, and at 6 months we go back and we evaluate how it's working so that we know that the policy is where we want it to be. Because I think that otherwise we're going to spend a lot of time trying to make something perfect when really what we need to do is test drive it. I'd be interested in what other people have to say.
Mrs. Samian?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mrs. Cassavant. Just some notes. Clear, concise. The process and the rules need to be clear. I think that this is a great start to put pen to paper. It puts together a lot of concepts from a lot of different communities. I think that a lot of public participation policies are page and a half, not everything said. It's like a contract. If you had every contingency covered, every contract would be 500 pages, but I think that what would be helpful as part of this, and I think it could be page and a half, what's the process? You know, when is it come up at the meeting? You know, amount of time overall we allocate to it. It seems to be there's a consistent amount of time that most boards put to it, so there's at least a period that there's an expectation of how much time we allocated to it. Subject matter, I think that definitely there are a lot of policies out there where it's within the purview of the board, not necessarily limited to the agenda. Question could be, obviously you can't get personal in terms of personnel matters or the nitty-gritty that we don't do, but it can be policy-based. I think one of the questions is, does it go back to prior decisions or not, or is it more forward-looking? Will be interesting to see where we come out. And then maybe a standard of conduct in terms of what the basic expectations are in terms of the interaction with the board, but I think it can be general and not specific. I think that the ingredients are here. I think we can pare it down quite a bit and get to these concepts. It seems like Mrs. Cassidy and I are on the same page. I mean, I'd like to hear from everybody else too, but we take another spin at it. Maybe a couple board members could take a spin at paring it down a little bit to hit some of the elements that have been discussed so far and bring that back as well at the next meeting, but that's just a thought. So I think I want to thank Taylor for putting this together. There were a lot of policies out there, more than I thought, in terms of what they say, but a lot of them have similarities, and I think that's where we can start as part of this pilot program as part of the first 6 months to see how it goes. So those are my thoughts.
I think there were a lot of towns that used another town for a basis because the language was
It's very similar.
plagiarism.
It's borrowing.
We do it all the time in government. If you find a good policy, you do it. Does anybody else have any comments? Ms. Flynn?
I agree that I would like to see us be less, rigid, but also set the right expectations. I've been thinking a lot about this because I think that I want to give the community the opportunity to make their comments. And as much as we say that we're always available, or you can send an email, or you can go see the town manager, I mean, at the end of the day, our meetings are really the only opportunity to address the full board in person. So I think it's important, but I would like to also have the opportunity to revisit the process, because if we see a lot of interest or demand, then let's also look at other opportunities where we can actually engage in conversation. And this is what's so interesting about your municipal approach versus, sort of what I do day to day for work. It's so awkward to have somebody standing in front of you saying something and you really don't engage in a dialogue, and there's not a back and forth, and I don't want to lose that opportunity. And, I don't want to be a cynic, but I think most of the time people aren't going to be standing in front of us telling us what a great job we're doing. So there's going to be, I think things that we'll want to unpack and learn a little bit more about. So I support the process. I would like to see how it plays out and go from there. So long-winded way of saying I agree with Mr. Samia and Mrs. Casavan's comments.
I think, in general, it's a good thing for people to be involved and have a voice and have an opportunity to connect with their elected officials. And, I think that we are available in a lot of ways. We are accessible. This is like Ms. Flynn said, that this is the only way for people to really address all of us at the same time in person. And I think it's a step in the right direction. And I think the 6-month review is a good idea. We can make adjustments to see how things go and, how we can continue to do this in a way that still allows us to get our business done. Our meetings are long and we have a lot of important things that we have to do. So, that 6-month review allows us to start moving in this direction and, find the best way that works for our community and for our board.
I think if we're going to do it, that it should be pretty open in terms of the parameters of what people can talk about. I don't think it should only be what's on the agenda. I've gone back and forth on it. I don't know how you reconcile a decision that was made 2 months ago that it's done, and have somebody come in and still trying to rehash it. But I guess we'll have to figure that out. I think we can do it. I think we can be pretty open, but I do think we have to have guardrails. And I think if it's too loose, and I read some of those policies that are like, why did you even bother writing the policy? It was like, there were no parameters. People don't know what the expectations are when they get up. I think people need to know what the rules are. Whatever we decide those are. So I think we just need to be clear what the expectations are, and write it down. I don't think we can get it down to a page. I just don't think we can do it. Maybe a page and a half, but and you're right, John. You could nail everything down. It'd be 5 pages long at least. But I think we should do our best to make sure that we don't inadvertently create a problem by not addressing something that we perceive down the road could be a problem. But anyways, so I do know that I saw the ideas that Ms. Casabian had. I think I was generally in agreement. I was playing around with a draft myself, working off of what Taylor had and reading some of the other stuff. I think we're all pretty much it sounds like we're pretty much trying to get to the same place. I do think we need to be careful on how we let the public comment period go. Because if it's too open-ended and we start having dialogue, we're going to have not a difficult meeting with the dialogue. These are business meetings, and we have to find a way to accommodate public comment within the context of those, because a lot of these are time-scheduled, posted, advertised meetings, but I'm sure we can figure that out. And like you said, if we did 6 months, we could see if it worked. And if we do a couple of months and we find out, hey, this isn't working, we need to do something to fix it, to make it better, we don't need to wait 6 months. So, okay, so what's the plan of attack?
I would be willing to work with you on it if the rest of the board is okay with that, and bring something back. Because I know that you kind of worked on a draft and I worked on a draft, and maybe we can bring our 2 drafts together and see where there's agreement and iron out what isn't in agreement, and bring something back for the next meeting for the rest of the board to react to. I mean, I think it would be pretty impressive if we could have this up and running, by the end of June. That's pretty good.
It's fine with me.
Okay? Yes?
Yes,
Yeah, great.
yes.
All
Perfect.
right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to next order of business. Is to review and authorize the chair to sign the applications and letters of support for grant applications through the Community One Stop for Growth Program. The Route 20 Phase 2 sewer improvements, which is a Mass Works grant. That takes Route 20 going eastward, correct?
Yep.
From Edmure. Holden and Clinton, Clinton Street water and sewer infrastructure, upgrades. Walnut Street sewer,
We're actually not including that one.
we're not including it. Okay. Walnut Street sewer pump station upgrades.
That's the one we're not including. Holden and Clinton Street we are.
We are doing Holden.
Walnut Street we're not, sorry.
Okay. Site feasibility study for 51 Hartford Turnpike, the former Edgemere Diner site. Real estate services, business improvement district feasibility study for the Town Center Association, Mass Downtown Initiative. Same for the Lakeway Business District, and that's it. Any questions on any of those? Did we get a leg up on these because of the designation we got, of the housing designation we got?
Yeah, we're in a better spot. More points out of the gate than last year.
Okay, we'll give it a shot. So could I have a motion to authorize the chair to sign the applications?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 12 is to review and act on the street closure request from Jason and Guinevere Molina, Lindsay Heffernan, and Brian Murphy for Wachusett Avenue from Bryant Ave to Longfellow Road on Saturday, June 11th, from 1:30 to 7 p.m. with a rain date of June 12th for a neighborhood block party. This has gone on for a few years. There haven't been problems. We usually have them check in with the police department to make sure that everything is okay. Typically they do, and it is, so what's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 13 is to review and act on the town manager's appointment of David Prince, Tutori Drive, to the Historical Commission for a term to expire on June 30th, 2024, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8D. Have a motion?
I had a question,
Yes.
because we just talked about appointments. So was this a vacancy, Mr. Isakar?
It was a vacancy, yes. Yes.
So I move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, I believe we're at correspondence, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, item 14 is an email dated May 6th from Sandra Fricks, school committee member, regarding Shrewsbury Education Foundation virtual trivia night, which was Friday, May 13th. So noted. Item 15 is an email dated May 10th from Joanne and Ken Helstowski for Birch Brush Road regarding yard waste update, May 10th, 2020, regarding issues with the waste management yard waste collection. So noted. Item 16 is an email dated May 10th from Dr. Sawyer, Superintendent of the Schools, an update on the Shrewsbury ninth grade admissions to the vocational technical high school. We had a good discussion. We heard a good discussion on that at the town meeting. Item 17 is an email dated May 10th from Sabrina Michael Duncan, Living in Freedom Together, Inc., Development Associate, Living in Freedom Together, Inc., 2022 Annual Fundraiser Press Release. I don't have the date, sorry. So noted. Item 18 is an email dated May 11th from John Savelli, 38 Knowlton Ave, regarding is the present challenge of yard waste collection an opportunity. Actually asking a question about yard waste, mulching, and composting food waste. And I believe Ms. Lass responded, and there's a follow-up email on May 11th from Mr. Savelli on the same subject, with more questions on yard waste collection issues and yard waste drop-off. So noted. Item 20 is an email dated May 12 from Sandy Burgess, President of the Rotary Club of Shrewsbury, 2021 to 2022. Shrewsbury Community Fridge Ribbon Cutting Invite, which will be May 31st at 4 p.m. At the Senior Center on Maple Avenue. So noted. Item 21 is an email dated May 16th from Chief Jim Bona, Fire Chief, regarding the Fire Chiefs meeting in Shrewsbury on Wednesday, the 18th. And most of us were able to attend when the chief was sworn in as the chief of the chiefs. Well attended and quite an honor. Expect good things from him. Congratulations. Number 22 is an email dated May 16th from Sarah O'Brien, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, regarding CMRPC brings Image 2050 to Shrewsbury. It's regarding the Central Mass Long Range Plan, which is similar to our strategic plan. Mr. Mizuka, is that anything that planning would be interested in? Do you know about that?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll engage.
Okay, thank you. Item 23 is an email dated May 16th from Paul Sheffer, 62 Westwood Road, regarding a request for a senior one-on-one meeting, and he had that meeting with Mr. Sami and Ms. Conlon. It went well. And item 24 is an email dated May 16th from Stephen Pohl, 26 Francis Garden Court, regarding plan ahead, and had a series of comments on issues around the town center. I can't read my writing, and the multimodal study, but talking about town center improvements, et cetera. So noted. Is there anything else to come before the board in open session? If not, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you very much. This evening, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.